Hello and welcome to another Soul Horse Sunday conversation. I'm Delia with True North Equestrians, and today the conversation is with Allecia Maine, and I'm going to have you introduce yourself.
Well, thank you for having me. My name is Dr. Allecia Maine. I'm a master animal communicator, energy healer, distance and in person. And I'm also an energy researcher, studying the consciousness and the sentience and the deep understanding and wisdom that the horses and the rest of the animal kingdom are here to share with us. And I'm the author of several books. My latest book is Sittings with Cisco, Conversations with a Paint Medicine Horse, about healthy emotional behavior for humanity. And I'm so happy to be here with you.
Oh, great. And I'm looking forward to a couple of things we just addressed earlier about, well, let's just go ahead and start there because I'll forget. You had mentioned that you're involved now in a project with an institute in California that actually gives science, like a lot of us talk about having soul connection with our animals and our horses, whatever. And you said that they're doing research now that actually gives merit on a scientific level to that. Can you speak about that for a bit here?
Sure. So there's a well-known institute in California that studies energy science. So studying the paranormal. So it's quantum physics, it's in the quantum realms, but it's just you're able to understand a lot more of the picture than some of the quantum science studies. So we have put together, one of the head scientists and I have put together and collaborated on a study that's going to talk about telepathy with equines. We're actually going to test it out. So we are super excited because this could be a massive breakthrough, not only in understanding the consciousness that animals totally have a consciousness. So we're not studying what they understand from a human perspective. It's from a human perspective, asking them in a completely conscious and sentient conversation between beings of two different species, what they understand, what they know about things. And it's really, it's no longer a projected, well, we think and believe that they're able to do this, and we think of, versus literally having an actual conversation, utilizing telepathic communication to discover what ethologists and what, field biologists and researchers can't really understand aside from the outside, movement patterns, food patterns, birthing patterns. They can understand things about the horses from a physicality, but that leaves out so much of the picture of who they are as conscious sentient beings and conscious sentient beings, and what they actually know with their millions and millions of years of evolution on this planet as a collective species.
Yeah, so interesting that telepathy is starting to, well, and animal communication, thank goodness, is finally starting to be, in my world, it's mainstream, but in the other world that I don't live in very well, it's just been poo-pooed and eye rolls and all of that. I still know people that when you say something about, well, they told me that, or, they tell me, it's like, I have a really good relationship with my horses and my dog, and so I know when my dog wants something, and people a lot of times don't see it. But I take him to work with me, and if I'm working at wherever it is, and they don't, I'll say something about, well, he wants to blah blah blah, and they'll go, well, how would you know that? And it's like, well, he told me, and they just kind of. So, but it is becoming far more mainstream, not mainstream yet, but it is far more acceptable, and at least it's opening doors for consideration. Whereas even 5 years ago, that wasn't so much the case. And there's more talk now about telepathy also. I mean, everyone has telepathy. All animals have telepathy, and we just sometimes don't recognize what's going on. So I'm glad that that's coming more to the forefront, so that people can learn to identify it when it comes calling more often.
Absolutely. So, I mean, imagine 30 years ago when I started doing this and people are like, you what?
Yeah.
And then you just start to realize it's like, wait a second, we have the picture so backwards. We've been sold the wrong bill of goods, and we've been taught completely in almost opposition of what's true in nature. All of the indigenous cultures that have ever lived on this planet, and we're going back at least 60,000 years to the beginnings of the Aboriginal peoples. They've always lived in telepathic communication with the animals.
Right.
It's a heart language
Right.
that also connects with the brain, but it's a fully connected, embodied language that all of life speaks. And we probably over the last, I don't know, I mean, at least what I'm conscious of is the last 150 to 200 years, but I'm sure many civilizations, before that, they try to shut it down, because if you don't connect with nature, then you don't have as much access to your total wisdom. You don't have as much access to the bigger picture, that you are deeply and intimately connected with nature and all of life. So
Right.
how much easier is it to shut that down, close people off from it, make them function kind of like in a box? And what the school systems teach, they don't teach anything about nature. They don't teach anything about our interconnectedness. So what's exciting is that, from my understanding from the Native American culture stories and beginning time stories, the animals spoke directly to the people. The creator did not speak directly to the people. The creator spoke to the animals, and it was the animals that taught the people how to live in balance and harmony in the four directions, in the north, in the east, in the west, and in the south, to be able to live on this planet and sustain it in abundance and beauty, which is what was given to us, without, oh, you pay every month for your gas bill or your phone bill. I mean, telepathy is a lot cheaper than telecommunications. And telephones and like all the monthly bills we have to pay. So there's so much exciting information that I feel is going to be coming forth, not just on these beautiful soul connections that they share with us, but literally like on the entirety of how to live on this planet in a sustainable manner.
Right. Right. Telepathy is everywhere. Like I said, we just don't always know it's happening. Sometimes we never understand that it happened. In the movie Rabbit Proof Fence, the women, the mothers and the grandmothers and the elders of the Aboriginal people, they sing their daughters home when they escaped from the missionary school. And that was the whole thing, is they would sing them home. So yeah, it's so interesting if we, and you get so overwhelmed with human life sometimes, because we have a lot of things we have to take care of, especially if we want to have horses. We've got to have a way to provide everything for them. And so we do get busy, and we sometimes forget to listen to what's singing us. I know that we were talking earlier, I'm trying to get my way back to Colorado, and the land always calls to me, always. So now I'm going to look at it more as it's singing me home after having that memory of that movie. Okay, so I know that your first horse that you was in your I'll say possession, and that came to live with you was Cisco. And before then, did you have a soul relationship with horses before? Did you understand the role that the horses do fulfill in our spiritual journey?
Never to the extent till Cisco came into my life. So I, when I was younger, my dad ran a resort in the Poconos. So right up the road from us was a barn, and I used to ride on the weekends. And, ever since I was tiny, and the first time I heard horse hoofs beating, I was, what is that? Like, whatever that is, I need to be near it,
Yes.
But
yeah, I still have to run to the window if I hear them.
Yes, like growing up in the Bronx, it was sort of like, yep, you're not gonna, have a horse under your bed. Although I was convinced I could keep a horse there, and I know. But through my early teens, my dad ran a resort in the Poconos, so I would go from the Bronx to the Poconos on the weekends, visit with the horses, and I didn't really grow up with parents that they loved animals, but they didn't really have a broad awareness of animals. So, my dad, since I was with him on the weekends and he would talk to me about horses, he'd be like, you need to be careful. They're big, stupid animals and they'll try to hurt you anytime they can. And, it instilled this sort of fear of like, I have to conquer the horse. But when I'd go up to the barn in the really early mornings and nobody was around, I would sit with the horses. And I didn't know at 10, 11, 12 years old, I didn't really understand the telepathic piece.
Mm.
I would never have been able to explain it. I wasn't honestly even aware of what was happening. There was just this feeling in the center of my heart that was like, God, there's so much in here that I don't even know how to start understanding, let alone unpack. But I always carried that with me. And then my dad moved back to New York, and so I wasn't around horses a lot till my mid to late 20s. And I started volunteering in New York City with a equine facilitated riding program that was literally run out of a townhouse in New York City. These were the horses that they would use to let riders go riding in Central Park, and I mean, these horses were literally living in a brownstone, like no windows, no grass, no, like nothing. And I remember standing outside one day with one of the horses, because when we were starting the one of the facilitated experiences for people, he just didn't seem right to me. And I said, can I bring him outside? And his name was Paddington. And we stood outside together, and it was kind of like a hazy drizzle. And I could feel like, even though I didn't have a huge amount of my communication skills yet or my body healing sessions, I could feel this animal did not feel well. And I just thought, oh my God, what would it take for me to just get on his back and like ride him out of the city right now and get him to green grass? And I wasn't able to do that for many reasons, probably because I probably would have gotten arrested if I did. I brought him back in, and a couple days later, I found out he had died from colic. And it was like that moment for me. I didn't know when I would be with horses again. I didn't know how I would be with horses again, but I just knew that somehow my destiny was tied in with them. And after that, I started taking communication classes, went to Hawaii, and right after 9/11, I moved out to Colorado because I just realized time is short. You never know what's going to happen. And within a year and a half, Cisco came into my life. I was at a client's house, and her son was about 6 or 7, and he still had to wear a diaper because his bowel muscles hadn't fully closed. So she was a fitness trainer before she was a mom. And so we just started talking, and I said, God, it would be so good to get him on a horse. I was like, I just feel like the muscles that he will have to use to hold himself up will actually help that. And I left our house that day, and I said, okay, universe, I need a horse. Like, I was thinking 1 to 2 days a week, for like an hour or two, somebody would let me walk this child around or try him around on the horse. And about 2.5 weeks later, my old roommate, I was driving down the road, and she did horticulture installations. And I saw her, and I pulled over, and the first thing she said to me, she said, I want to give you Cisco, but if I give him to you, you can't get him back. You can't give him back. And I was like, I just was like thinking like an hour or two. I didn't really think that that's the way my horse was going to come to me. And about a week before, I was at a neighbor's, and she had she was having a house sale, yard sale. And there were these halters on the table, and I bought one, and it was pink and gold. And I was like, as I was walking out, she goes, Allecia, do you have a horse? And I was like, no, but I think I'm getting one. And then a week and a half later, Michelle gives me Cisco, and it was like, how could I say no? So I said yes. And that was a 21-year journey with him, learning so much about myself and so much about horses. So I wouldn't say before that I had a heart horse before Cisco. Horses were in my heart, but he was truly like my heart and soul horse and my teacher for 21 years.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I bought a saddle pad and a cooler at the Denver Merchandise Mart one time, and I didn't have a horse, but I got a horse within probably about 6 or 7 months. It was such a nice merino fleece pad that it's like, oh, this is beautiful. I need this for my horse, and I didn't have a horse. So yeah, it's interesting how they kind of prepare the way for us. So maybe mention a few things that Cisco taught you about your soul journey here.
Oh my God, that horse taught me so much. I feel like he's the horse who raised me into an adult. So I had always come to horses with that way that my father kind of said, you got to be careful and you got to have fear. And
Right.
I mean, I don't know that I 100% bought into it, but I know it definitely played in my subconscious. So I had met Cisco the year before Michelle gave him to me. She was my roommate. And she had asked me to come down. I had been doing body work at that time. And she said, would you come down and take a look at him and evaluate him? I don't know if he's in pain. She wasn't the best rider. She was a new rider, which is totally fine, but she didn't feel totally safe. And she wasn't sure how she was reading it. She's like, I don't know if he's just being stubborn. I don't know if he's really in pain. I don't know if she didn't know if she was afraid. So I went down and I evaluated him, and it was so weird. It was like, even the first time I was with him, it kind of felt like, who is this horse? Because I had worked on a lot of horses before that, but there was something about this horse, and I couldn't fully see it yet. Like, oh, this is going to become your horse. But I remember working on him and feeling like, oh my God, I want that horse, and that it's just all I put out. But I had a very like type A Bronx, New York personality. I wanted what I wanted, when I wanted it, and how I wanted it, and this was the way it was going to be. So one of the biggest things that Cisco taught me, especially at the beginning, since I thought that he would be this therapy horse, right? Cisco was on 65 acres. So whenever Mary and her son would come, he would disappear. I mean, just like could not find him anywhere. And so this happened about 3 or 4 times, and I started getting really, really pissed off. And I was just like, are you kidding me, buddy? Like, this is why I called you in. And one of the things he taught me very early on was, this isn't your show. And that was a big lesson. I really, really had to learn. Could I have put him in a stall so he was there when I got there? Sure. But one of the biggest things he taught me about was acts of faith and true trust. And demands are very different than expectations. And having this intensity towards either one, like I'm going to get my way, kind of got resolved really quickly. I would find myself at times, there was like this huge, long wood like picnic table, like out and back. And I'd find myself sitting there oftentimes weeping because I could not find my horse. So he really off the bat taught me, he was like, let go of those expectations and those demands, because this isn't the way this is going to go. The second thing he taught me was, he wasn't there for me to work with somebody else and him. He was there to work with me. And there was something in that equation that he really made me realize. He said to me, and it's even in the book, he said, you would never have asked for a horse for yourself because you thought you couldn't afford it and you thought you couldn't do this, but you asked for it for someone else. And because of that, it was at least my gateway to show up for you. He said, but I was never here for me to work with somebody else. I was here to work with you. And I didn't really realize, another huge lesson was, I had no idea how much the animals are here to teach us about ourselves. And this was not you know, we didn't know anything about equine facilitated learning. I didn't know anything, you know, about that till a couple years in. And I had a friend of mine who was a counselor. She was an addiction counselor, but she worked with horses and stuff. And I asked her to come out and just do a session with us to see basically not if he was in alignment, was I in enough alignment with him to be really listening. And he really taught me how to understand that this being with horses, being with animals, it's a very different experience in terms of really understanding their levels of consciousness and sentience than what I would probably say 99.7% of the world is used to experiencing with animals.
Right. And it's interesting how you say they come, you think that you're going to have them for this reason, or you're going to be in the company of a horse for this reason. And with my bay mare Enchantress, I didn't go to get a horse. I just went to be away from the house because I had lost a gelding a few weeks earlier, and he had foundered, and I tried to save him for 3 months, and I had to let that go. He wouldn't stop rotating, and I was so distraught and in disbelief that I couldn't save him. It's like, I never had a horse that has foundered or had a bad colic. How can this happen that I can't fix it? I could not believe that I could not save him. He was only 14, and it was just wrong. You know, people that have gone through this, they all think the same thing. But it was happening to me, and I thought, this isn't possible. So I just volunteered at a rescue. I volunteered at 3 of them, and only one replied. So I went to this rescue, and I met Enchantress that day. She was named Matilda at the time. And she kind of signaled to me out in the pasture. I was looking at all these beautiful horses. It was a rescue from an Arabian breeder that had had some mental health issues, and animal control. The animals were in disrepair and neglect. And so the animal control was coming to take them and euthanize them all. And so when she found that out, she turned everybody loose, 4 stallions and 13 mares, just turned them loose on 12 acres. Well, it was mayhem. And there were some injuries from all of that. And animal control couldn't catch them because of the mayhem. So they knew of a woman who had a stallion. I don't really know how that story goes. And they asked her to come help. And when she saw who they were, she knew they were well-bred, high-dollar Arabians. And so she took them. And so she had them at this rescue. She couldn't afford them either. So she was trying to rehome them. And when I went there, I zoned in on Enchantress right away. She signaled me. And when I got her, I didn't mean to get her, but I got her 3 weeks later. It's what needed to happen. But I thought that I was getting, a riding horse, and she's the one who taught me about agreements. I have this class that I do on agreements, how to know your agreements with your horse. Her agreement with me is she would keep me safe. Well, she had never been ridden. She was an untrained horse. I'm getting older by the day. It was a concern to have an unridden horse and a horse that hadn't been on the trail. And then her agreement she wanted me to do was to help her be the best she can be. So when you talk about, you had mentioned something about safety, how that, horses keep us safe. And when her agreement was that she would keep me safe. So I was thinking she was going to keep me safe when I'm riding her physically, my physical body. And she has done that. I've only had one incident when cows chased us that she had a problem. But she has kept me safe. But what I realize now is what I got is what I didn't get. Yes, she's kept me physically safe, but because she has changed my whole philosophy on how I work with horses, now I'm so much safer in my spiritual beliefs. I'm so much safer in my emotions by actually allowing those new beliefs and those new thoughts and new experiences and new way of doing and being to come into my life. So sometimes, like you said, you didn't ask for a horse for yourself. You wanted something different. You thought you were going to help other people. A lot of times what you think you're getting is not what you're getting. I really thought she wanted to be a very successful trail horse and maybe some arena stuff. I suck at arena, but if she wanted to do it, then I would just buck it up and do it. But what she wanted me to help her be the best was to help her overcome her anxiety. When she can manage her anxiety, then she's at the best she can be. But it took me a while, actually. It took me about 5 years to actually understand what it is she wanted to be the best at. But it's so interesting that what you get is what you're asking for isn't what you get, but it's so much better than what you thought you were asking for at the time.
Yes, you get what you need. You may not always get what you want. Like the Rolling Stone said, you may not always get what you want, but you get what you need.
Yes.
And that is a direct quote that Cisco, like, because after our time together for a little while, he said, you need to show up tomorrow with a pen and paper and take dictation. And I was like, excuse me? And he said, yeah, you need to start writing this stuff down. And that was one of the quotes he said. He was sharing something with me and he said, you might not get what you want, but you always get what you need. And I was like, how much learning, like how many hits can my ego that wants to do this certain thing take by like not getting it, but in not getting it, it was the perfect remedy, for what I needed to actually grow.
And a lot of people are like that, and they just don't realize that they have a horse for this reason, and they have great intentions. But once they learn to surrender to what, go ahead.
They have intentions, but it's their intention. They
Yes,
don't ask for what's your life about? What's your, how do you perceive your life? And what do you want?
Once they know, and they know how to allow that type of surrender into, the pathway together, the journey together, then they get so much more, and they have so much more access than what they had before. But a lot of times it takes a while to learn what's being presented to you other than what you intended, even though your intentions were so pure, and your intentions towards honoring your horse was there. Sometimes it takes a while to know that we're okay together, but somehow where I'm hoping to go with this isn't working. And so, we have to be aware of that. And every time we come against that, like what I'm really desiring or what I thought was going to happen isn't happening, we need to just kind of expand a little bit more and allow for a little bit more information. And most of us can only do it in increments. Every now and then we get a huge download and a big opening. But in general, we have to just step aside and get a little more perspective at a time.
That's the place where being able to take a class and learn, I almost want to say relearn, because we're gifted with it as children. It's in our software. Learning how to properly communicate and do animal communication or interspecies communication, it's so valuable because it can take 5 minutes. Like I have clients and students that I work with that take my courses or work one-on-one with me. They're like, I cannot hear my animal. Like I have tried, and we do some breath work, and we do some exercises to actually locate what that block is and when it started. And when they remove it, it's like the world opens to them, and it, like for me, it took me a long time because I didn't know that animal communication even existed till I was like 25, 26 years old. But as soon as that hit and that channel opened for me and I took class, it was like the world was never the same again, So I would say, yes, it can take a long time, but if you really are open to it and you really want to do it, working with an animal communicator or taking courses from an animal communicator, it just opens so quickly. And then what's cool too is the channels that open, I mean, it's soul information, it's health information. You could be receiving information from animals that have crossed over. For me, because of where my background is and having studied Qigong for 30 years and just absolutely loving traditional Chinese medicine and the 5-element theory, and knowing that so many of the behavior issues and so many of the health issues that are coming up in these horses, they're energy issues or they're body issues before they're actually what shows up on a blood test as a disease. And so being able to work with the animals, being able to ask them directly for information like, hey, what do you know about your body or what's going on, or being able to assess their bodies at a distance and say, oh, okay, I get it, because that was out of balance and that was out of balance. That was creating like a block in your cerebral spinal flow. And that was, why you weren't being able to digest properly, no matter what great food that you were on or great supplements, or it was an emotional issue. So it's really, really awesome how much starts to open up. So it can open up so quickly. Once we open that channel back up, we just have to find the place where it kind of got closed. Like for me, it got closed with my Dalmatian when I was like 5 years old, and he had taken my toy and I stuck my hand down his throat because he wasn't gonna bite me. He was my buddy, and my dad saw this and like bonked the dog on the head, and the dog got in trouble, and I was like, he doesn't understand our relationship. Like he doesn't understand, like I totally trust this animal. And so there was nothing wrong, but he got in trouble because of me, because I didn't think anything of our relationship. Like I never thought that that dog would bite me if I stuck my hand on he's my friend. He took my toy. I'm getting my toy back. But then when he got in trouble and then he was subsequently given away, I kind of just collapsed it all. And then I always knew in my heart that I wanted to help animals heal. And I thought I would be a veterinarian. And then math and science came in, and I was like, that's not going to be the way I can help, because I'm not really good at it. And I'm not going to get accepted to a school. But then through fitness training and then my Qigong path, Qigong kind of led me to the animal communication piece. And it was like, I was just so thrilled that I could hear them. I didn't even know what I'd fully be able to do other than translate, what was happening. But then when the healing work came in, and it was like, holy cow, I actually get to help you guys heal. And I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not an acupuncturist. I'm not a chiropractor, yet on an energetic level, I can do work at that level. And they literally, even thousands of miles away, can heal. And so then I kind of really got it. I was like, oh my goodness, like you said, right? My intention, the purity of my intention at 5 years old was, my mom said, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, I want to be a vet and help sick animals heal. So that was my pure intention, but it did not look the way I thought it would look.
Yeah.
And now it's awesome because you start to realize after a while, Western medicine can maybe deal with 10 to 15, maybe 20% of our issues. But that's like 80 to 85% of the issues they can't actually deal with, because either they're emotional, or there's a body misalignment, or there's something going on in the energetic of the relationship. And it just turned out, it was like, oh my God, the path of not being able to go down, the allopathic path, it just turned out so much better than I could have ever imagined. And that part of it wasn't even part of my consciousness. The animals brought that to my consciousness.
Right.
So much we can learn on physically, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. I mean, they just have such a full picture of what they're able to share with us. And the cool thing is, it's not anthropomorphization. It's actually real consciousness and sentience. Like, I know they make movies in Hollywood, like, The Jungle Boy and like those kinds of things, but it's like, no, actually, this is our reality. We've just been told that it's not.
Right. Speaking of spiritual, I don't know anything about your spiritual philosophy or anything, but how do you feel like Cisco actually influenced your spiritual beliefs in any way, having this relationship with a horse?
Tremendously. So I grew up Jewish. I was supposed to get bat mitzvah, but one, I didn't feel comfortable getting up in front of people and like and speaking. So that was one piece. The second piece was, I don't understand this religion thing. People go to temple on Friday, all dressed up. They're, kind of phony to each other in a lot of ways. And then by Saturday, they're talking about each other behind their backs. And so I don't know why at that age, like 12, 13 years old, there was no, like, I didn't know of any other form of spirituality, right? Other than the religion. And that it seemed odd to me. It was like, if this is a religion like about God and people loving each other. So I ended up in a probably 16 through 18, maybe 19, I just realized how I didn't feel like I fit. I didn't feel like I fit here. And that's when, the pain of that was what started opening that spiritual path. So I became a fitness trainer, and that path led me to a spiritual mom, so to speak, who taught me about many different things other than the traditional, like, Western way of living. She taught me about meditation and macrobiotic cooking, and I started studying and practicing a ancient Chinese self-healing martial art called Qigong. And Qigong was what, like, started pulling the veils off of, like, this interconnectedness with animals and nature. And I feel like I talk about in my book, it was like I had been preparing in New York on my spiritual side, and then September 11th hit, and I moved out to Colorado like 8 weeks later. And Cisco had been preparing on his side in Carbondale, Colorado for me. And it was kind of our destiny to come together because he just opened my spiritual awareness humongously on so many levels. And it wasn't, people talk about the spiritual path, and I thought it was like, oh, it's supposed to be like all butterflies and unicorns and rainbow parts and like, oh, everything's wonderful, right? And I mean, there was a lot of painful stuff that got uncovered. And when I started my spiritual awakening, it was when I realized that there had been sexual abuse in my life when I was 1.5 years old. So I hadn't even remembered it. And everything started cracking open. So everything that I had built myself as, and the shell, of my personality and my way of being and my toughness and my strength and all that, I had no idea that the spiritual path was going to be about letting go of all of that armor, and having to come face to face with my fears and my vulnerability. And I mean, I thought I was totally capable of taking care of myself, and I was strong and I was powerful, but I never realized the vulnerability piece. And Cisco spent a lot of years working with me on that, because really what I thought it was about from that type A perspective, right, was like, someone's got to win. That's what I learned from my father. It was, he even said to me at some point in my life, I should have let you and your sister win more. Like, do you think so? Really? But the thing with Cisco that he was trying to teach me was winning is not a sole event. It should be a win-win, So there was a lot of years that he was truly like my spiritual teacher and my Qigong master, because what I learned about the Taoist philosophies and the Tao and the way of living, the monks literally lived, and the scholars lived amongst nature. It was nature that was teaching them. So me being given this opportunity to have Cisco and to be on this ranch, and not to be like in a like a barn type atmosphere where there was like a competitiveness, or everything was kind of like on the superficial level, not the soul level. It was such a phenomenal experience, but it was hard at times. It was not this like beautiful, peaceful, amazing, easy journey. It was like 1 step forward, 4 steps back. And I had to really understand, again, right, with winning, it wasn't the concept of win or lose. It was the concept of he was trying to break me out of the things that I had learned at such a young age that were really detrimental to my being. Yet they were the only things that kept me feeling safe. You talked about safety before with Enchantress, right? I felt safe if I was in charge and control. I didn't know that I could feel safe truly trusting Cisco, like, you actually will take care of me and you actually will look out for me. Like, I can trust you.
And I do readings with horses, channeled readings. That's how I get most of my information, because I'm just That way I'm not influenced by outside energy of the people when they're there, because I'm really susceptible to that. But in several readings, horses mention vulnerability, and the way they refer to vulnerability, they refer to it as a safe place to be.
Yes. And a strength.
You know,
Like I always,
yeah.
in my perception and perspective when I grew up, vulnerability was dangerous because if you
Oh, I
were
know,
vulnerable,
right?
something attacked you, right? I mean, what happened when I was
Yeah,
1.5?
it's to be feared.
Completely
Yes.
Totally. And so that concept of, in my mind, vulnerability being weakness, that was really, really hard to, that was a hard lesson for me to let him teach me. Do you understand that vulnerability is actually your strength? Like I
Yes.
couldn't,
Yes.
for years, I just couldn't see it,
Yes.
you know?
Yes, I
When I
know.
finally
Yeah.
did, I was like, oh my goddess, this is what
Yes.
you were trying to say. Like, yes. So, you know.
Yes, horses believe that a lot. And they also believe about surrendering. A lot of them call it the surrender, also being a safe place to be. And it doesn't make sense to us as humans. We can feel threatened if we have to surrender. A lot of times we feel like we've lost, or we're going to have to compromise so much. But horses see, and when you think about it, the horses as being, they're so big and so powerful and so strong and so fast, and yet they acquiesce with humans most of the time. It's truly phenomenal. My theory on that is because they've stuck with humans all these years, so they can help us walk us into the new frontier, which is the work of spirituality with horses. But they're so capable of wiping out anyone who comes near them, and yet they don't. They actually do give themselves to being vulnerable. They surrender to walk this life with humans, which is truly amazing. And so many times it's not honored at all. I mean, it's starting to be honored more, but so many times it's not honored at all. But they do believe that vulnerability is a very safe place to be. They give themselves to it so that they can survive with humans, literally on a physical level.
Well, I think also too, even bigger, they give it to themselves so they can survive. We are always thinking about them in a stall or maybe a small herd. We don't have any awareness of the wild horses and how their culture works and functions. They're not pests and varmints. The creator put them here for a very specific reason. They have families, they have lives, they have so many similarities to us. And they're not the ones that are creating the destruction on the planet. They're actually promoting a very peaceful environment. So they have to be vulnerable. What things that they live to show on Discovery Channel or Animal Planet, on the horses battling, the stallions battling for the mare. I mean, I'm around a herd of 27 formerly wild Mustangs on a very regular basis. And what goes on in the herd is so different. And I know that these guys are in a confinement, but it's so different than what is portrayed on TV, and it is so much of what we show about the whole entire animal kingdom is so maligned because 95 to 98% of the time there's peace. They live in a very peaceful state. They go to the watering hole, they do their thing. What we show on TV is the 2 to 5% of the chaos that exists when they're going to eat or feed, because that's entertainment.
Right.
People don't want to just see animals laying around and hanging out and being peaceful in nature. And what's so fascinating on my spiritual path, what they've been showing me, they're like, you humans are 95 to 97% in chaos. You're maybe 2 to 5% in flow, right? And so it's so fascinating because, we get talked about in our human psychology, or the animals get taught, well, it's human nature. It's like human nature is way closer aligned to nature than what we see playing out and portrayed. And even if we look at the mental health crisis on the planet today, I mean, if we're so healthy, why are so many kids and adults in this country alone on drugs and medication instead of meditation and being peaceful with nature? Like, it is so, part of my spiritual path with the animals was them constantly showing me the reversals, what we do as a human species. And we're animals. I mean, we think we're like the most intelligent species, and I go, not based on our behavior, we're not. We're not. Because we create so many things that actually go against our nature, that are based and have roots in fear and a disconnection, with source, and being tuned into that natural environment in a 360-degree experience. And that was a huge thing that Cisco kept tuning me into. He's like, you cannot think just like this. He said, you have to think in this 360-degree dimension. That's why sometimes too, with communication pieces, it can be challenging to describe it, because as humans, we're so used to like the 2-lane highway, right? So we'll say, okay, something's happening physically, or something's happening emotionally, or something's happening psychologically, or something's happening spiritually. And for them, it's happening all at once in simultaneity. There's no separations. So that part too has been so fascinating to learn from Cisco and from the other animals that I communicate and connect with around the planet, and from the wild horses and from the wolves. It's like, wow, these were all things that all of our indigenous relatives have been telling us the whole entire time. And we chose not to get it, and now somehow it feels like we're coming full circle. And at least with my work, it's taking a more oddly scientific based nature, because I'm like, wait a minute, I'm going to be talking about like quantum physics and what they did, but it's bridging the gap in a lot of that science. And it's just fascinating to me that it's coming directly from speaking with them. And it's so simple. There's such a simplicity to it, that it's like, wow, thank you guys so much. Thank you so much for being willing to even put up with any of us. Because like you said, right, that horse in a millisecond, you could be toast. And yet that is not their intention.
No.
Whatsoever. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, well, we're coming down to the hour, so why don't you tell people how they can get a hold of you?
Sure.
And I'll also
my
put it
website
in the notes on YouTube. I'll also do a live link down there.
Okay, awesome. So you can get in touch with me at my website, which is Allecia, Allecia Maine.com. And if you'd like to open up to learning about animal communication, or you want to learn the body work that I do, I teach it. And I just highly encourage I feel like the paradigm is changing. And I didn't really fully understand this at the time I was learning from Cisco. And if you'd like to read my book, Sittings with Cisco, there's a link on the website to purchase the book or the ebook. And I think it's just coming down to, we're coming full circle to really understanding the things that we don't know, and that vulnerable place that it puts us in, like how it put me in learning to let go of everything I was educated about or indoctrinated to. The paradigm is really shifting for us to understand so much more about the truth of who we are as humans and the role that we actually play on this planet. And to be able to start with hearing your horse, for even for any type of horse training, right? Before you ever start with a horse, you should know what's going on with its body. But you should also be in that place of like, wow, actually I can communicate with them in their language, which is also my language, right? It's our natural language. That is just such a boost to any relationship with any of your animals. So if that is something that I can help facilitate for you or be of service to you with, I would be honored to.
All right. And I'm going to put that down in the contact, as well as I think you have an Instagram page.
I do. Yes.
Yeah, I'll put
And
that
would
down
be
there.
Animal Healer, Heeler.
Oh, yes.
And I'll also give you my YouTube page. So I have put together episodes with certain clients with certain things that were going on with their animals. Some of them are with wild horses, some of them are dogs, cats, but I literally show you and walk you through in a more of like an entertainment, like edutainment kind of process, what's possible, that we can work with these animals at a distance, that we can talk with them, that we can connect with them, and seeing how quickly working in the quantum energy field, it just shifts things like instantaneous. I mean, jaw-dropping things that, you know, a Mustang that was not allowing touch for 1.5 years up until the front of his chest. I worked on him for maybe 30 minutes. He came back over, and for the first time in 1.5 years, he was able to be touched from his shoulder all the way to his tail in one 5-minute session that he had never allowed for 1.5 years. I mean, just things that you go, how is this work even possible? But it's what the horses already know, and they're helping us understand in a very simple way.
Right. Okay, I will put those in the notes below. And I'm Allecia with True North Equestrians. If you'd like more information on my work, you can go to my website, which is also linked below, truenorthequestrians.com. So thanks for joining us on this Soul Horse Sunday, and I'll see you on the next episode.